So we are live right now. Hey everyone, कैसे हैं आप सब? I hope you are doing great. So let's get started for another day. आज 28th of June है, आज फ्राइडे भी है और मैंने कल ड्यू टू द इंटरनेट प्रॉब्लम आई एम नॉट एबल टू कनेक्ट. So once more again, let's get started with a great energy. यहाँ पे मैंने चैप्टर कुछ मैंने फिनिश कर लिया है एंड अभी मैं चैप्टर नंबर 10th जिसमें रिलीजियस एंड सोशल रिफॉर्म आफ्टर द 1858 11th नंबर में चैप्टर 11th कर रहा हूँ. कौन सी बुक से? बिपिन चंद्रा, हिस्ट्री मॉडर्न इंडिया. ओके, क्लास 7th का जो एनसीईआरटी की बुक में पास पड़ी हुई थी तो आई हैव फिनिश्ड इट. मैंने कल इसको ख़त्म कर दिया था. व्हाट आई डू, आई ट्राई टू मेक इट स्टिकी नोट्स सो दैट कि इट कैन ईजी फॉर द रिवाइज. सो आफ्टर रीडिंग दिस बुक from and I will try to make it the sticky note from this book. Class 7th NCERT, whatever the important point has been given in this book, I will try to make it the sticky notes and I will revise it more and more time. So let's get started without any further delay. Religious and social reform after 1858. So I have seen that there are many peoples like Kesab Chandra Sen, and there are many people, Swami Vivekanand and Raja Ram Mohan Rai was one of the great leader. He carried forward for the Brahmo Samaj, and then we will see that the religious movement in Maharashtra, Paramhans Mandali, another Gopal Hari Deshmukh, known as the Lokhitvadi, and then Ramakrishna Mission and Vivekanand. I have finished it. So from here, Swami Dayanand Saraswati and Arya Samaj, even these topics I have finished. And Theosophical Society, Olcott and Madam Blasky and Olcott has made the Theosophical Society in the USA, and come to India, founded a headquarters of society in RDR near the Madras in 1886. Theosophical movement soon grew in India as the result of the leadership and given its Mr. Annie Besant, who had come to India in 1893. And Theosophists advanced the revival and strengthening the ancient religions Hinduism, Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, and they recognized the doctrine of the transmigrations of the soul. They also preached the universal brotherhood of the man. As a religious revival, the Theosophists were not very successful, but they made the peculiar contribution to development of the modern India. It was a movement led by the Western, who glorified the Indian religious and the philosophical tradition. And then I have finished the Aligarh school and Sayyid Ahmed Khan in Aligarh school. And the most important reforming among the Muslims was the Sayyid Ahmed Khan. He was tremendously impressed by the modern scientific through and work. All his reconciles and it with Islam. And this he did first of all by the declaring that the Quran alone was the authoritative work for the Islam, and all other Islamic writings were the secondary. Even the Quran, he interpreted the light of contemporary rationalisms and science. In this view, any interpretation of the Quran the conflicted with the human reason, the science or the nature's was in the reality misinterpretation. Nor were the religion's tenet immutables. He said if the religions did not change with the time, it would become the fossilized as had happened in the India. All his life he struggle against the blind obedience to the tradition, dependence on the customs, ignorance, irrationalisms. He urged the people to develop the critical approach and the freedom of thought. So long the freedom of thought is not developed, there can be no civilized life, and he declared that he also warned against the pantheism, narrow-mindedness. And then will be try to read from this topic. Akali movement. Akali soon forced the government to pass a new Gurudwara Act in 1922, which was later amended in 1925, sometime with the aid of the Act, but often though the direct action. The Sikhs gradually turned out to Gurudwara with the corrupt Mahant, even though the hundreds of the lives had to be sacrificed in the process. Apart from the reform movement and the individual reform discussed about there were the numerous other similar movements and the individual during the 19th and 20th century. The religious reform movement of Indian modern times had an underlying unity. Most of them were based on the Prince doctrines of the region and the humanism, though they also sometimes tended to appeal to the faith and anticipate authority to bolster the appeal. Moreover, it was to the raising the middle classes and the modern educated intellectual that they appealed most. They tried to free from the anti-intellectual religious dogmas and the blind faith with the human intellect capacity to things and the reason. They oppose the ritualistic superstition, irrational and obstacle element in India. Many of them abandoned to, to the varying degree and the principle of authoritative in the religions and evaluated truth in any religions or its holy books or its conformities to the logic, reason and the science. Swami Vivekananda said, "It a religion to justify itself by the discovery of the reason through which every science justifies itself, are the same method of investigation such as apply the sciences and the knowledge outside from to be applied to the science of the religion. In many opinions, this must be so, and I am also of the opinion that this is done to be the method. Some of these religions appeal to the tradition and claim that they were merely receiving the pure doctrine, belief, practice of the past. But in fact, the past could not be revived. Often there was no agreed picture of the past. The problem that an appeal to the past often created where posed the Justice Ranade, who had himself often asked about the people to revive the best tradition of the past in the following. What shall be the revive? Shall we revive the old habits of our peoples? When the most scared of our caste indulge in all the abominations as we are now understand them, the animals' food, intoxicating drink. Shall we revive the 12th form of the sons or the 8th form of the marriage, which include the capture, recognize the mix and the illegitimate intercourse? Shall we revive the hectombs of the animal sacrifices from year and year, in which even the human beings were not spared the proportionate offering to the god? Shall we revive the satyr infanticide custom? It is the word by the appeal to Justice Ranade, and come to the conclusion that society as a living organism is constantly changing and can never go back to the past. The dead and the buried, or the born or the dead buried, and the born once for all, and dead past cannot. Therefore, to revive, he wrote in every for reformer who appealed to the past to interpret it, to make it appear to the agree with the reform, and he was suggesting often the reform and the outlook were the new. Only the other justification was based on appeal to the past. Many of ideas which conflicted with the modern scientific knowledge were the usually declared to be the later aggression or the misinterpretation. And since the Orthodox could not accept this view, the religious reform come into the conflict with the Orthodox, and the section become, at least in the beginnings, the religious and the social reform. For example, this is what the Lala Rajput Rai write regarding the Orthodox opposition to the Swami Dayanand Saraswati. The amount of the obliques and the precautions to which the Swami Dayanand was exposed to his lifetime may be gathered from the fact that numerous attempts were made on his life by the Orthodox Hindu assassins were hired to kill him. Missiles were thrown to him during the lecture, and this disputant he called the hired imagery of the Christian to apostates, the atheist, and so on. Similarly, Sayyid Ahmad Khan arose anger of the tradition. They abused him, issued a fatwa against him, and even threatened his life. Omni suspect of the religious reform movement was expressed in the general attack of the priesthood and the rituals. Emphasize on individual right and interprets religious script in the light of the human region and the human welfare. A significant feature of the humanism was expressed in the new humanitarian act of morality, which includes the notion that humanity can progress and has a uh, progress that the moral value are ultimately those which favor the human progress. Social reform movement were the embodiment of this new humanitarian morality. Though the reformer tried to reform their religious, their general outlook was the universalistic. Raja Ramu Rai saw the different religions as the particular expression of the universal code and the religious truth. Sayyid Ahmad Khan said the Prophet had the same faith or deen, and every people had been sent prophet by the God. Keshav and the same expressed the same idea as follow. Our position is not that truth have been found in all the religions, but all the established religions are the truth. Apart from the purely religious consideration, there is the religious reform movement fostered among the idea India's greater self-respect and the self-confidence and the pride in their country by interpreting their religions past in modern rational terms and beating out the many of the corruption and irrational element from the 19th century religious beliefs and practice. The reformer enabled their followers to meet the official taunt that their religions and the society were descended and inferior, as Jawaharlal Nehru has put. Jawaharlal Nehru has said that the rising the middle classes were the politically inclined and were not so much in search of religion, but they wanted to some cultural roots in sailing on. Sometimes they gave them assurance of their own worth. Sometimes that would reduce the sense of frustration and humiliation that the foreign conquest and the rule had produced. The religious reform movement helped many Indians to come in terms with the modern world. In fact, they rewrote the recast of old religious into the new modern modern mold to suit the needs of the new social groups of the society. Thus, the pride in the past did not prevent Indian from accepting the essential supremacy of the modern world in general and the modern science practical. Of course, some people insisted that they were the merely going back in the original, most ancient scriptures which were suitably interpreted. As a result of the reform outlook, many Indians began to acquire the modern and this worldly secular and national orthodox in place of the narrow outlook dominated by the consideration of the caste religious, though the latter tendency by the no means come to be end. And also more and more people began to think in terms of the promoting their physical and cultural welfare in this world, in place of the passively accepting their lots and waiting for the improvement in the life after death. This movement also to some extent ended the Indian cultural and intellectual isolation from the rest of the world and enabled the Indian to share the stream of the world idea. At the same time, they were no longer bewitched by the everything in the West. Those who copy with the West blindly were increasingly looked down. In fact, while adopting the critical attitude toward the backward element of traditional religions and the culture, welcoming positive element of the modern culture, and most religious reformers also oppose the blind imitation of the West engaged in the ideological struggle against the colonialism of the Indian culture and the thought. The problem here was to maintain and balance between the two aspects. Some went for the modernization and tended to encourage the colonization of the culture, and others defended the traditional thought, culture, institution to extent of the glorify them, and opposing any introduction of modern idea and culture. The idea of reform argued that the modern idea and culture would be the best embedded by the integrating them into the Indian culture stream. Two negative aspects of the religious reform movement may also be noted. Uh, First of all, them to create a need for the small percentage of the population and the urban middle and upper classes. None of them could be reached to the vast masses of the peasantry and urban poor who continue to by the large to live their life in the traditional customary way. And this was because of they basically given the voice to the urge of the educated and urban strata of Indian society. Second, the limitation which later became the major negative factor was the tendency to look backward, appeal to the past greatness, to the relay of scriptural authority. This tended to go against the positive teaching of the reform movement themselves. They undermine to some extent of supremacy of the human region and scientific outlook. They encourage the mysticism in the new wave and the post pseudo-scientific thinking appeal to the past greatness created a false pride and thus message, while the habit of finding the golden age in the past. As a check on the full acceptance of the modern science, hamper the effect to improve the present. Uh, but most of all, this tendency tended to divide the Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, and Parsi, as also the high caste Hindu and low caste Hindu, high caste Hindu, and low caste Hindu. Any over the emphasis on the religious in the country containing the many religious were the bound to be the decisive effect. Moreover, the reformer put one side emphasis on the religious and the philosophical aspect of the cultural heritage. These aspects were moreover not the common heritage of all the people. On the other hand, the art, architecture, literature, music, science, technology, etc., in which all the sections of the people had a play an equal role, were not sufficiently emphasized. In addition, the Hindu reformer invariably confined their the praise of the Indian past to its ancient period. Even the broad-minded men like the Swami Vivekananda talk of the Indian spirit of Indian past achievement in this sense alone. These reformers look upon the medieval period of Indian history as essentially an era of descendant. This was not only unhistorical but also the socially and politically harmful. It tended to create a nation of the two separate policies. Similarly, an